Hi, so welcome to this episode of History Hunters on this very sunny day in Central California. I have decided to do an episode on the Argonaut Mine disaster of 1922. History sometimes is full of tragedy, so we're not going to gloss over it, but this one happened in August of 1922 when approximately 47 men died in one of the gold mines in Jackson, California. We decided to start out this episode at a roadside rest area, but there's a number of memorial markers here talking about the Argonaut and Kennedy mines. The Argonaut mine was discovered in 1850. The Kennedy mine was discovered 6 years later. They played dramatic roles in the economic development of California. They produced $105 million in gold. The Kennedy mine, which is opposite the highway over there, has a vertical shaft of 5,912 feet, the deepest in the United States, and it changed mining methods in the mother lode. The Argonaut mine was the scene of a most tragic mine disaster. 48 miners were trapped in a fire at the 3,500-foot level on August 27, 1922. A few survived, but most of them perished. Both mines were closed in 1942. Over there we've got a marker memorializing all the men and women who served in the armed forces. Let's go over here and check out this area over here. Probably another memorial plaque. This is a greenstone and granite rock from the Argonaut mine. This came out of the mine. Talks about this being the disaster location. A number of these men that died were from all over the world: Italy, Austria, Yugoslavia, Germany, Switzerland, Spain, Portugal, Herzegovina, Serbia, and other states back east. Check it out, this little memorial marker here. It talks about Jackson in 1848 was a village of huts and tents called Bodeillas by the Mexicans from bottles strewn about by those who tarried here. In 1849, it was named Jackson for Colonel Jackson, an early day resident. In 1853, Amador County was carved out of Calif County and Jackson became its county seat. Here's a marker to Anthony Caminetti. He was the district attorney, state senator, and U.S. congressman. So we're going to be walking up to the Argonaut mine where the disaster of 1922 occurred. This way. Right? It's this way. See it up there? We came up here a couple years ago and stuck our heads in the mine. It's like there's a homeless camp here. Surprise, surprise. I hate to say it, but historic California, this is what you got. Homeless camp. I mean, there's everywhere. This is sad. Looks like they tried to clear it out though. There's the famous Argonaut mine right there. It's the gallows. They call it the gallows frame because it resembles a gallows. And
to be honest, it was eerie to be standing on the ground where 47 men entered the bowels of the great mine to never return. Rescuers also flocked to this spot, as did the families of the trapped men anxiously awaiting news of their loved one.
This huge disaster. 47 men were trapped in the mine when there became a fire down to the bottom. I mean, this steel is pretty intact. Someday it'll all rust and fall apart. Look at the winches up there and
The Argonaut Mine was the heartbeat of Jackson, along with the nearby Kennedy Mine, where ore-crushing hammers shook the earth around the clock. By the early 1920s, the Argonaut's main shaft extended almost 5,000 feet into a maze of interconnected caverns and honeycomb tunnels. Most miners, primarily immigrants of Italy, Spain, and Serbia, earned $4 per day.
giant hole here in the ground.
So the Argonaut Mine is right above Highway 49. Seems to be very busy today with all this nice weather that we're having in California. And I just need to point out something over here. The famous Kennedy Mine is right over there, just up the hill from the Argonaut Mine. Let's see if we can stick our camera up there. Have you look in there. That's amazing. It's crazy to think that this was in operation many, many years ago.
I just spotted this. It looks like a control box of some sort, maybe alarm bells. Maybe they had to alert people when certain actions were taking place here. They have really tried to keep people out of here. We're trying to find our way in here. I don't know if there's any way.
Dirt road.
As I made my way up the hillside of dirt and loose rock, technology temporarily failed me and my microphone cut out. Sarah had found her way up by a different route. It was here that she was explaining to me how a branch had raked across her head, and she wanted to know if she was cut enough to bleed. Fortunately, she wasn't injured.
You're probably going to hear my heart beating.
Heart beating and breathing hard.
Breathing hard. Yep. Oh wow. Look at this old pulley wheel here.
Well, this razor wire here certainly is not an invitation to come in. Decided to keep people out. Check out that big drum with big steel cable on. I'm quite sure this is where the hole was.
So we were coming up on the 100th anniversary of the tragedy that happened here at the Argonaut Mine, in which I believe 47 men were killed. An electrical short occurred down in the mine shaft that ignited some of the timbers that were down there that shore up the earth. And there was an immediate fire. Men were trapped. They couldn't get past that point, and they perished down in the hole. This town was traumatized by what took place that day. A lot of fathers and sons were lost. They thought they were doing them a favor by trying to dump water down in the hole to extinguish the flames, but what it did is possibly drown the men. It was determined later that they probably died within hours of being trapped down in that hole. In fact, there's pictures, well-known published pictures, of the fact that they wrote on the wall kind of the last messages.
On a very warm summer evening, just before midnight on August 27, 1922, one of the worst mining disasters in California history took place at the Argonaut. Some 47 men were trapped nearly a mile underground when a fire erupted, filling the mine with toxic gas and smoke. The miners saw rats fleeing the tunnels. One alarmed miner called to the surface on the mine telephone and learned that there was a fire. They were told that there were no plans in place for a rescue, so they needed to protect themselves. They were completely on their own. What followed was a 22-day rescue effort that was followed by the nation in print. The fire broke out at 3,000 feet, trapping most of the men on the night shift. A few miners stationed close to the surface got out alive, alerted others, and began pouring water down the shaft. By dawn, the townspeople, firefighters, and every miner in Amador County had rushed to help. They could hear water hissing as it hit the flames, raging out of control in the impassable shaft. It took 2.5 days until August 30th to extinguish the blaze. 2 rescue teams began to reopen the 2 passageways that connected the Argonaut with its rival and neighbor, the Kennedy Mine, which had been closed after a 1919 fire. In dim light, slowed by heavy oxygen tanks and plagued by small cave-ins, rescuers laboriously cleared rock, timber, and debris. Dozens of reporter and newsreel crews with their hand-cranked cameras swarmed into Jackson. One of them was already there. Movie producer and actor Hobart Bosworth. He was staying in Jackson and using the mine as a backdrop for his silent film, The Beloved Unknown. Bosworth took his camera crew back to the mine to shoot real-life fire scenes and try to rescue miners. Reporters maintained a station at the National Hotel where they were staying and writing stories and collecting photos to send by airplane. After a week's effort, rescuers had yet to reach the miners, but they and newspapers remained inconsistently optimistic. A front-page Los Angeles Times headline almost 2 weeks after the fire had screamed, "Rescue crews hope to reach miners in week." Yet 3 days earlier, the newspaper had quoted engineers and mining officials as saying they believed that there was no hope and that 47 coffins had been ordered. The American Red Cross stood by, offering assistance as well as shouldering up morale. Prohibition was still in effect, yet the Red Cross dispensed a couple of shots of whiskey to each rescuer before entering the tunnel, and a few more when they climbed out. The liquor was supplied by the federal government as a special dispensation to help boost morale. On the evening of September 18th, rescuers who were wearing masks and carrying oxygen tanks inserted a caged canary behind a bulkhead, only to watch it perish from the deadly gases. Rescuers lost all hope of finding survivors, but broke into the tunnels. In one area, crews watched as rats scurried away from the bodies of father and son Charles and Arthur Oberg. All but one of the other bodies was nearby. It turned out that the doomed miners had fled farther into the mine to escape the fire. Trapped nearly a mile from the main entrance, they built 2 bulkheads and barricaded themselves, trying to stave off deadly carbon monoxide. Devastated townfolks buried the victims over 4 days in 3 different Jackson cemeteries, the Protestant, Catholic, and Greek Orthodox. 47 coffins were placed in the ground, even though the body of Edward William Fessel would not be found for a year. He was the man who used the carbon from his lamp to scrawl a message on a rock wall, 3 o'clock, gas getting strong. As the oxygen supply dwindled, Fessel made the final entry, 4 o'clock, nothing more. Their oxygen had run out in 4 hours.
The U.S. Bureau of Mines found out that the company was kind of negligent in some of their safety precautions, but nothing was ever done to any of the company officials.
As I climbed up the rather steep slope directly above the Argonaut Mine hoistworks, I saw concrete blocks spaced apart that I quickly surmised served as the foundation for the pillar supports on which a long conveyor system rested. That conveyor ramp is clearly seen here in this early photograph. The wheel seen on the ground here was once used to take the slack out of the cable that raised and lowered carts that ran between the frameworks and the mill at the top of the hill. A number of these wheels are clearly visible in this photograph.
Some of the 10 buildings down here that are associated with this mine. I saw this little water faucet here, and not sure that possibly this was the one that they turned on to run the hose lines over to the mine shaft. But it makes sense because it's not very far away, maybe 100 feet. Just think the men who built these buildings have passed away a long time ago. I've lost Sarah once again. I don't know where she went. I'm not sure what that is up there, but looks like there's some electric power lines that ran to it. Maybe if somebody knows what it was, leave a comment in the comment section below. This is such a cool part of California history, how they mined, pulled millions of dollars of bullion out of these places, and then the town's just basically dried up. Now Jackson is pretty much just a tourist town in the motherlode. We didn't expect to do an expose on California homeless as we entered this very historic district, but man, this is what they've left behind.
Be respectful. They were people too. They are people. Not were.
This was their camp stove before they got ran out.
They might come back at nighttime.
So we've come over to the very historic Jackson City Cemetery here in Amador County, and there's thousands of graves. This grave back here is the mass grave for a number of victims. I believe at least 8, 9, 10 victims of the Argonaut fire of 1922. We're just going to take a look at this mass grave here. It's surrounded by these jagged rocks. Unknown grave here, unknown grave here. This is Charles Oberg and Arthur Oberg. They died together. They were father and son. Right here is a nice plaque for Charles T. Fitzgerald, born in 1894. And right over here is a nice plaque dedicated in 1977 in memory of Elmer Batchelor, James Clayton, Evan Eli, William Fessel, Charles Fitzgerald, Ernest Miller, Arthur and son Charles Oberg, and Bert Siemens, who died August 28, 1922 in the Argonaut Mine fire. James Clayton's marble grave marker. There's Miller, buried there. Unknown grave here. And Mr. Eli's buried right here. They all died together, perished together, and they're all buried together. There's at least 40 others who are buried in different locations. So I came over here to the Catholic cemetery, which is adjoining to the Old City Cemetery, and I noticed that there are more miners' graves over on this side. So let's go check them out. Here we go, Argonaut Mine Tragedy, 1922 miners' graves. You gotta find them. Look at that, all the tile has been kind of falling off of that. Oh wow, this is tragic. I mean, look at the extent of these graves here. These are all miners' graves. It extends for quite a ways, and they're all buried in the same kind of jagged rock set in cement, and it stretches quite a ways. One of the headstones of the men had been broken off over here. But let's check it out. Pardon me for walking on this. But it talks about all these Italians. Obviously they're Catholic. Too many names to actually read. They all died in the fire. There's at least 2 markers down here for the victims. Just to get a good look, I have to walk out here. Simone Franceschioni, 1874. One of the victims of the fire. And right over here is another one. Looks like, oh, I can't even say the name. Born in 1892 in Italy, died in the fire. Very sobering event. Look how far that stretches. So yesterday was Saturday, and I didn't get to visit all the graves that I wanted to find here in Jackson. At the time I forgot that Noche was one of the people that I was trying to look for. He's right over here. I'll tell you about him. Angelo Noce. He died January 5th, 1922. He was 74. But check this out. This little monument here talks about Angelo Noce being the father of Columbus Day. He devoted his life to the memory of Christopher Columbus. Now, let me tell you how that happened. He was actually an Italian immigrant who was the founder of Colorado's first Italian newspaper, La Stella. He and other Italian Americans had dreamed about having a celebration, a day of celebration for Christopher Columbus. While he was there in Colorado, he worked with Colorado's first Hispanic state senator to sponsor a bill proposing a Columbus Day holiday. And within 5 years of Colorado's creating the holiday, 14 other states were also celebrating Columbus Day. Angelo died in Denver, Colorado.
Found the grave of a Thomas Paulin, who was a judge in Amador County. Says he was a native of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and he died in 1877 at the age of 50. This also is a very cool grave for the Bright family. Samuel Wales Bright died in 1907, and his wife Margaret, 1924. And their son, who died in 1862 at the age of 3 months. But check out that granite, polished granite.
This is a sad grave of a very young man. Connor Thomas Kirkwood Yates. See you tonight. And then up here, there's a grave. Not sure if this individual's been buried, but check that out. It's all ready for him if he does go. Robert Leroy Dalton. Looks like he was a truck driver, maybe a logging truck driver. So right behind this iron gate is Margaret Bergen, wife of James Bergen. She died 1865. She was just 23 years old. And then we have a Mary Skelly who died at age 16, July 3rd, 1862. Check out this one for Richard J., our darling children of Schober. Richard J., 1865 to 1866, just a baby. And Lewis, also just a baby, 1862 to 66. That's incredible. The statue lasts longer than the people. So I want to thank you for joining us on this episode of History Hunters. Looking back at the terrible mine tragedy that happened here at Argonaut Mine in 1922. We would always appreciate hearing what you thought, maybe any insights that you had about early California and the hardships that people face. You could give us a comment and also give us a like. We would certainly appreciate it. Thank you so much.